So hi everybody, welcome to my little presentation on strawberries today. I'm looking very much forward to telling you all about strawberries and having a conversation with you and hearing what you're nervous about and how I can help you feel more confident moving forward. This is my first class without a co-host, so it will just be me here today. So go a little easy on me as I try to navigate the administrative side of Zoom, get people in from the waiting room, and I'll be muting you as you come on too, so please don't take offense to that. If you have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat or wait until the end and I can go ahead and address them at the end there. That way I just don't get too distracted or forget where I'm at. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started here. All right, so my name is Angelie. I work over here at Chenard's, and I am passionate about people, I am passionate about helping people get passionate about plants. So I'm thankful for you for joining me today, and let's go ahead and get into it. We're gonna be talking about all about how to grow strawberries, and we're gonna start right from the beginning. So what is a strawberry? They are native to the Northern Hemisphere, which is what makes them really easy for us to grow here. Potentially can see a harvest up to 1 to 2 pounds a year, which is really great. They're versatile, so you can use them as a ground cover. They creep along and they can cover pretty efficiently the ground area. You can use them as a row crop. You can plant them between other things like orchard trees. You can use a raised bed or hanging baskets. You can let them droop down and hang from your porch as well. You can also container them. They're super easy, no matter which way you're going to choose to do it. And so it's up to you how you would like to do it. These are considered members of the rose family, which is something that we wouldn't quite assume right off the bat, which is why they have a great smell to them, very aromatic. And another real fun fact about it is that the strawberry that we eat, the whole big fleshy fruit that you think of when you think of a strawberry, isn't technically the true fruit of the plant. It's actually the accessory fruit. So the true fruit of the plant are the, totally not sure how to say it, but the akins, which are these little, what we would think of the seeds on the plant. Again, I am going to mute everybody. Don't take offense to it. It's just how it goes. If you want to talk to me, let's throw the questions in the chat or talk about it at the end and I can unmute everybody. So again, these little, what we would think of seeds are the actual fruit of the plant, which is really great, really fun. So next we're going to talk about the anatomy of the strawberry plant because it's really important to understand all the components of it that you're seeing. You can see above right here, this just right line right here, that is where we want to see the soil level. Everything below that is roots. Everything above that is considered shoots. So when planting, it's really important to get that crown level extremely right. And this is important for all plants that have a crown. As you can see on this picture, it includes the leaves, the flowers, the berries, how they grow and how they connect to this crown. And another thing I really want you to pay attention to here is how it's displaying the runners. These are expansions of the plant, technically. It's what they shoot out to propagate themselves and further their progeny. So you want to pay attention to these runners. They can be either good or bad depending on the variety. We'll talk more about that in the future, so don't get too hung up on it now. Just observe this picture and know what the strawberry should look like. Next, we're going to be talking about the varieties, the different kinds. One really cool thing about strawberries is they're self-fertile, so no problem about thinking about pollinators. I mean, we always want to think about pollinators, always keep them in mind, but we don't have to worry about pollinators to get our fruit setting. However, it always helps with yields when you have pollinators and adjacent plants for pollinating. So there are three major types of strawberries we're going to be talking about today. June bearing is a really popular one. Large, tasty berries. The downside of these, it can be a plus or minus depending on your frame of mind. They have one large crop of the year. So that's just one large crop. You get it out, you get it done. Wham bam. Thank you, ma'am. The everbearings, they are two crop per season, one in the fall and one in the summer. So that's really great for continual eating, so that you're not just one and done. Day neutral bearing are really important as well to think about. They're categorized under the everbearing, so we'll talk about them kind of together going forward. But it's important to notice that the day neutral bearings, they don't care about daylight length. They don't care about what time of year it is. They care about temperature, so they'll continue producing. The true day neutral bearing will continue producing as long as the weather is favorable. So these would be great for containers and greenhouses. And again, we'll be kind of grouping the everbearing and the day neutral together as their care is somewhat similar. And the June bearing has its own type of care for runners and whatnot, own type of different kind of growth cycle to look forward to. Right now we're carrying bare root in at Chenard's. This is kind of what it looks like. They're a little more dormant than this right now. You're not going to see a whole lot of green growth right now, which is good. That's what we want, especially when it's 20 degrees outside. So here there's like 10 plants in each one of these gallons, or it says 25. This year it's 10 in a gallon. And those aren't going to survive in that gallon. Those are 10 plants that are meant to be bare rooted, pulled out, and replanted somewhere else in your raised bed in a container where it's got the space that it needs and it requires to grow. They will not live in these pots and they will not be productive. So you're definitely going to want to be planning your transplanting. So some fun facts about everbearing and day neutral that you should think about while you're picking your varieties is that they tend to have smaller fruits and smaller yields. However, they have longer seasons because you can either get, the two crops or the consistent crops, which is a larger season than the June bearing. I find they tend to be pretty sweet. They have a great quality of flavor. The great thing about these is they don't have a lot of runners, which is great for this type because you're going to want to remove the runners for better fruit production. The runners are the parent plant trying to put off some daughter plants. So they're putting their energy into creating more plants when they need to be putting that energy into creating the berry. So another really important thing to think about when you're going to remove the runners from your everbearing and day neutral is that it helps promote or discourage new daughter growth if you can cut it at the right time. And I'll show you that here. If I can find the right picture again. We'll talk about it again, if not here. Trying to find it. We're going to go in here, the anatomy of a strawberry. So you would want to cut your runner for the June bearing and day neutral bearing before they quite reach this. You don't want to see the roots setting or the flower setting, but you want to see some of the leaf growth. And if you catch it right at that sweet time, it'll really discourage a daughter running. Whereas if you cut it before you see any leaf setting, it could encourage running rather than discourage it. So let's go back to where we were. Sorry, there we go. So again, great for container gardening because of those few runners. We don't want them putting off daughter plants. You want them to stay where you put them. So that makes them really great for container gardening. Here are some really great varieties you might want to look for when you're going to purchase your strawberries. Right now at Chenard's, we have Albion, Seascape, and Cabrillo. I believe we've seen Tribute, TriStar, and Hawaiian Berry before. So feel free to contact us, ask if we're going to get those in at any time. I'm not totally sure. But I am totally interested in trying this Hawaiian Berry, red and white berries with a pineapple flavor. Have you ever heard of such a thing? But I know for a fact that the Albion and the Seascape are really delicious flowered, or strawberries. So those are always really great options for you. I'll go ahead and leave this page on the screen for a second, just in case you wanted to take a little picture. If any of you had opinions on the different varieties, their flavors, and how well they grow, I might want to hear about that at the end, because I have a limited experience with different flavors of them. Like I said, I know Albion and Seascape are really great.
Could you go back to the previous day neutral and slide that you had so I can take a picture of that?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Also, I'd like to state again too, if you wanted me to go back like that, ask some questions, you can always ask at the end too, because I am muting people. Don't take offense to it, please. Well, we're going to continue on here. Here we go. On to June bearing. So like I said before, one crop per year around June, early July. They have a large concentrated harvest. So wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, get it done. The thing about June bearers is they produce many runners. So they like to create lots of those daughter plants. And you kind of want to encourage that with June bearing because they're not as productive the first year of planting. The plants actually get more productive and once the daughters have been established and go on to the next year of production. So daughters are good in this case. You want them to kind of set their runners, get established, and then come spring, if you think there's too many, they're too close together, you can kind of go through and thin them then. I'll give you an idea of kind of how much space they need here in a little bit. We'll talk a little more about it. So people find that June bears have an all-around better flavor and better quality, and they tend to be larger, which makes them great for jams and freezing. Just all around great berries. A lot of people tend to not like to go this option because they want the container gardening or the continual harvest of the everbearing. So we're going to move on to the varieties. Right now we have Mary's Peak, which is extremely popular in our area. People who love them just love them and they need to have them, which I want to plant some because I want to know what that feels like. Why are they so amazing? It's because we find they have excellent yields, delicious quality of berries, and the great thing about June bears too is they tend to have resistance to fruit rot and other issues because they're only producing in the earlier season and when it's maybe a little bit cooler. So these are all really great varieties. I'll take a minute just in case you want to take a picture of this as well. All right. Alrighty, so we've picked our variety. Now let's see about planting. What does that look like? So like I mentioned earlier, just slightly avoid planting the crown. There's just a real tight sweet spot between too deep and too shallow that you're gonna wanna hit just right. Avoid curling the roots in the hole. This is incredibly important for container gardening, as you want your roots to be able to grow to their maximum potential. And when you curl the root, you kind of hinder that growth because now it needs to correct itself, which takes time, takes effort, takes energy. So you're really going to be doing your plant a favor if you can make sure all the roots are faced straight down and able to fully just stretch out and live to their full potential. So avoid curling the roots at the end. If you don't have the space, or you should generally try to have the space, like at least 6 inches of soil growth in containers, I would say. But you can trim the roots to help you kind of achieve that. I wouldn't trim any more than 1 inch off the ends, and you can always make sure to remove the dead bits that look dry and crunchy and just non-viable. It's just to help it get the grossness out of the way. And another important thing when you're planting is to always pay attention to your crop rotations. Don't keep planting strawberries where you've had strawberries for the last 10 years. You want to kind of keep your pests, your diseases on their toes and switch it up on them. Because if they know you're growing strawberries there year after year, they're going to just keep coming back for it. So you can really mitigate a lot of the issues you might see by practicing good crop rotation. I'm going to touch on this just a little bit more coming up in this presentation, but we can talk about it more near the end, or I'm also going to be doing another class in the near future about starting your own vegetable garden. I will go into it much more depth there too as well. So again, here's the picture of the strawberry. As you can see, just right, too deep, too shallow. It's really just a fine line. Site selection. So one of the most important things is they need full sun to be able to produce their berries, especially with the full sweetness and for full health. You're going to want to avoid frost pockets and low drainage points. Strawberries like well-draining soil. They like to be moist, but they don't like to be soggy. So if you're looking at your lawn or your garden space or wherever you're thinking about planting your strawberries, think about the way like water moves. And if it's going to pool, if you have like a dip in your lawn area, water is going to tend to pool there. Your strawberries are not going to like it there when it gets wet. And in thinking about these frost pockets, frost actually, cold air, kind of works a lot similar to the way liquid would with gravity. Cool air sinks down it below the warm air, so it kind of filters along the ground area and will follow the curves of the topography and will kind of collect in these lower areas just like water would. So if you plant in these low frost pockets and low drainage points, you're potentially causing yourself issues with wet feet and frozen roots. So always keep that in mind. Another good thing to always think about, no matter what you're planting, just always think about it, is a good crop rotation. You're going to want to avoid 3 years of Solanaceae and Rosaceae, which just means tomato, nightshade family, and the rose bramble family. So things like tomatoes, potatoes, and raspberries, you're going to want to avoid planting in those same areas for 3 years and kind of just bring in other families from other areas of gardening families, or considering putting it to fallow for a few years, which means just letting a cover crop or something, or letting bare soil, just let it chill out and hang out. Again, we can talk more about crop rotation in the future or at the end, or you can come and talk to me. Mounding the soil helps with drainage. This means, mounding it, planting at the top of the mound. That way the water can kind of flow to the ends and flow out of your rows and out without creating low drainage points that will ultimately sog and make your feet of your plant soggy. You're going to want to space them about 12 to 15 inches apart for your everbearing and your day neutrals. This will allow them to reach their full potential, get as much sunshine as they need. But with June bearing, you're going to want to allow just a little bit more space between them. You're going to want 15 to 18 inches apart to allow them to spread their runners and create those daughter plants. Again, come spring, if you see that those plants are too tight together, there's not enough space for air circulation or for sun to penetrate, you're going to want to go through and thin them to about 12 to 15 inches apart or more. All right, so the next important thing to think about is the soil needs of your strawberry. Strawberries love lots of organic material. Organic material increases nutrition, drainage, aeration, and water retention. So drainage and water retention are like two very important things that seem like opposite sides of a spectrum, when really they work really well together to prevent, the sogginess of the feet of the plant. It really wants the soil to be well draining. So if you need to amend your soils, please do. The native soil around our area in the Willamette Valley is very heavy with clay. So we would recommend amending that soil. You can dig your hole, pull out the native soil. We suggest taking half of that native soil, amending it, and putting it back in. Because while it is extremely heavy with clay, it is extremely good in nutrients. So it's great soil, but it just needs some more drainage for our plants. They prefer a pH of 6 to 7, so just very slightly acidic. And if you're worried about the pH of your soil, you can always amend that with either an acid planting mix or some sort of acidic fertilizer to not throw it too far off the spectrum, because you don't want to go too acidic because they will be unhappy with that. So some very useful soils to use as tools for you would be the purely compost, which adds that organic matter. You can also use it as a mulch. The soil building conditioner can also be used as a mulch, which is really great for increasing drainage and water retention. Harvest Supreme has chicken manure and bark mulch in it, so it's great for an increase of organic material and drainage. So I amended my soil, my strawberry soil in the springtime of last year with a little bit of Harvest Supreme. The ones I did that to just took off. They loved it. Consider, if you're doing it in a container, consider using potting soil or blue ribbon blend as your base soil instead of what we would have as a base soil in a garden of the native soil. Use the potting soil, the blue ribbon blend, and then amend it as you need with the other soils or amendments. So if you're worried about your area being too dry, you can use blue ribbon blend and purely compost to kind of help blue ribbon blend compost to help create more moisture retention. If you're worried about your feet getting too wet, consider using something that will help increase drainage. These are all really great options for you. If you need help making these decisions, you can always ask anyone at the Garden Center. Send us an email at info@chenards.com or come find me. All right, we're gonna move on now. Caring for your strawberry, the fun bit. So as I've mentioned before, strawberries like it moist, not soggy, which is kind of a fine line that you're balancing with them. Never let the shallow root system totally dry out. The root system on these strawberries are only about 3 inches deep. So you're going to want to maintain moisture at that 3-inch level which can be kind of difficult. If keeping that top soil moisture is difficult for you, consider using a heavy mulch like the purely compost. So keeping that moisture consistent during the growing season is extremely important because these strawberries are made with a lot of water. They can't produce the fruiting body of the strawberries without the water needed to expend for it. Containered strawberries are going to dry out a lot faster than the strawberries planted with their native clay soil or, in the ground at all, because they have the heat protection of the soil, whereas containered plants just get kind of cooked by the sunshine throughout the day. So you'll find that strawberry plants in containers are going to require more frequent and very deep watering. Fertilizing is important for strawberry growth as well. You're going to want to, you have several different options for using fertilizer. We recommend using a granular as it is like a slow release, which helps for the whole production season. You can use either the all-purpose, the citrus fruit tree one, or the tomato, herb, and vegetable. They're all really great options for a fertilizer for strawberry. You're going to want to fertilize your June bearings after production. So after they put off their strawberries, this helps establish their daughter plants and really get them ready to go to come June for the next season when that production really ramps up for them. However, the everbearings and the day neutral will require a feeding during the growing season, which you would want to fertilize April, May, and June. This will help really push the growth of those berries during the season.
Can you talk about drip irrigation and watering a little bit? Is there any difference in sprayers versus drip lines?
Yeah, I would say there is a difference between sprayers and drip lines. Drip lines are always more efficient for water usage. You're going to use less water with drip lines. It's going to be more reliable. It's better for your pollinators, your local pollinators, native pollinators, and it keeps the moisture off the crown, which is important. That's where I was headed next. You want to keep fertilizer off the crown. You want to keep moisture off the crown as best as possible. You don't want that crown molding. So you can use a sprayer. I use a sprayer. I spray my plant. They do just fine. But a drip irrigation is going to be much higher quality and efficient.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. All right, where was I? Again, I'll be answering questions at the end, which isn't much further now. So, mulch is important. So you're going to want to mulch with compost or manure in the fall/winter to help keep that moisture consistent and to really push the new growth of the next year and reduce the amount of weeds you might find. Again, in the winter, the temperatures drop, plants stop growing. So you're going to want to reduce your feeding schedule nearly to half the point. They hardly need any food at all during the winter. Plants don't really grow below 55 degrees. So they're just kind of maintaining it until the next growing season. Harvesting and pruning. You're going to want to pick every few days. Of course, wash before you eat. You're going to want to remove any of the old fruit that you weren't able to get to, or that went bad, or the bugs got to. You're going to want to remove the stems in which they were growing on, and you're going to want to remove the unwanted runners of your everbearing and day neutral. So the best yield you're going to find on your plants is the year after you're planting. So this is important for the June bearers, but you're also going to see that with your everbearers as well. That being said, after 3 or 4 years, they start to lose efficiency. You can go further than that, but you're going to see less and less production. So we would recommend replanting about every 3 or 4 years. Avoid, again, crop rotation is important. So avoid planting where tomatoes and rose families have been in the last 3 years. After the growing season is done and you're getting ready to head into dormancy, remove all the dead foliage, remove all unwanted runners and daughters, unless you want them to kind of get established and ready to go for the next season. And you want to mow down your June bearers to 2 inches after production. Taking care not to mow the crown, because that is really the life force of your plant. So if you mow into the crown, you might kill it. But mowing it down to that 2 inches, getting rid of the shoot growth will help it enter dormancy and be able to be easily maintained throughout the winter. Finally, pests and diseases. Prevention is always key with these things. Good crop rotation, pruning to have good air circulation, good drainage, and practicing healthy habits with your plants are all great prevention strategies from even having to think about this section, except for baby deer. Deer, they're ruthless. We all know deer. They're probably the biggest pest you're going to run into with your plants, deer and slugs. There's not much you can do for deer besides physical deterrence and repellents. You can put up your fences, you can put them where they can't reach. Repellents, we recommend using a smelling repellent that you can put around your area. So when they smell that, they're just coming to the area, they're gonna, no thank you. But if they do wander in it, we also recommend using a taste repellent if you're having issues. That way when they wander past the smell, they're like, oh, I can deal with the smell. They get to the plant, they take a test bite off of it. Pooh, it's spicy. They don't want anything to do with that plant anymore. So having that double repellent system will kind of really, truly keep them off your plants. Birds, you're going to want to put up, we sell some really shiny tape put up to kind of repel them from even wanting to come to the area. Some insects you're going to possibly run into is this Drosophila, which lays eggs in the fruit, which is not great. We want to eat our fruit. We don't want them to be eating it. Again, June bearers are less susceptible to these kinds of issues because they grow earlier in the season and they're done earlier in the season. Symphyllans, these are harder to treat for, but they are easily controlled with crop rotation and good tilling practices. Most issues with insects you can remedy using the spinosad spray. Always, always, always read the instructions on the label. Keep your chemicals away from the flowers and don't use a systematic, which is really bad for you and your pollinators in the area. So always keep your health and your insect health, pollinator health in mind as you're treating. Slugs, I said, is going to be a big issue with strawberries. It's like the only insect issue I had. You can mitigate slug issues. You can use Sluggo, which is organic. You can just spread around your soil. Other people use other options, physical options that may not be as effective, such as like putting out eggshells to cut up their bodies or beer to kind of let them drown themselves. Or I've heard of people using like bowls of water as moats under the legs of tables to stop them from physically getting up the table and onto the plant. There's a lot of options, but Sluggo is always really, it's easy, it's effective. I would highly recommend it. The other issue you're going to see with strawberries is kind of a fungal issues like botrytis, powdery mildew, leaf spot. Good drainage, air circulation, and pruning helps prevent these, as well as keeping water off the foliage and the crown, like I mentioned earlier. If you do start to run into issues, fungicide like a Serenade is a really good option. Again, you're going to want to read your chemical instructions to be sure that you're using things correctly. Always, always, always read your fertilizer, your chemical applications, anything. Alrighty, that's it. I hope that is easy peasy. Gives you lots of confidence moving forward to grow your strawberries. Thank you for joining me. And I will go ahead and open the floor for questions now. Or I'll read the chat as well. Should I plant the runners that you pull off? That is a personal preference. If you want to continue to try to propagate more strawberry plants, you can attempt to plant them in a new area if you don't want them around your mother plant. Or you can throw them away. It's up to you. They can live from that state. Where along the runner do I cut it? Oh, I see Darren joined. Sorry, I might be a little behind. You might have gotten to these. Also, feel free to unmute yourself at any time to ask any questions. I'd love to hear from you. Or if you have variety specifics that you love. Darren says you cut the runners adjacent to the crown. In theory, you can use the runners to establish new plants. So he's been addressing things in here, which is great. Should you pluck off the flowers of June-bearing varieties in the first year? How many years do they live? Usually the first year you will have a few flowers in your June crop varieties. You will have better establishment if you remove them. My strawberry beds are fixed in raised containers. Rather than rotating crops, can I amend the soil? Ooh. Darren says you cannot reliably eliminate disease organisms that prohibit replanting by amending. Often issues with strawberry raising, where space allows, I like to do a partial bed planting, half the bed of strawberries and half to other crops. Then in 2 years, you plant the second half to strawberries when the first plant ages out. Smart. This allows for continual production of berries while still practicing good rotation. Great point, Darren, thank you. Strawberries like high nitrogen fertilizer, ? Is fertilizing once in the spring sufficient? Oops, never mind. I answered the question. Is 1 inch of water a week sufficient? Darren does a quick follow-up here. On drip for strawberries, you need to run them more frequently than you would usually for drip systems on deeper rooted plants. Shorter runs every 2 to 3 days instead of 1 long run per week, because they need the consistency of the moisture, and their shallow root systems are so shallow that you have to ensure that they're getting moisture, because the in-ground soil will dry from the top down first. Each year, do you mow down the mother plant of the everbearing and day neutral strawberries and just keep the daughters? Is there an ideal plant? For everbearing, Darren says, for everbearing day neutral, remove all runners but keep the parent crowns. Do not mow the foliage for the everbearing, just the June bearing. Thank you for the informative talk. They are now ready for some strawberry shortcake. Yes, if I could pass the whipped cream. That's like my favorite cake. And is there an ideal plant to rotate with strawberries? I'm not sure if there is a one-size-fits-all answer to that question. Because the idea is to rotate and not just always have one that you go to. You want to kind of keep things fresh. A lot of people like to use legumes as their rotational crops, as they can introduce some nitrogen fixers into the soil and rhizomes. And strawberries love nitrogen, so that would possibly be an ideal option. Darren says good rotations are leaf crops, cold crops, legumes too. So all righty, that catches us up on questions in the chat. If anyone wanted to kind of unmute themselves and come on, that wouldn't be a bad idea. If not, we might start thinking about ending the conversation. Again, I'd like to mention we love talking to people. It's our passion to help people figure these things out. And it's, again, my passion to see your passion get ignited about plants. So please don't ever hesitate to email, call, or come into the store. Companion planting. So companion planting, this person asks, do we know of any companion planting that would be beneficial to strawberries? So companion planting isn't referring to what you would rotate into that bed after strawberries. Companion planting is like what you might plant next to a strawberry to kind of help them both thrive. And Darren says herbs make good companions, thyme and basil. Basil and strawberries together in the same bed, you just have so much you can do with that. Can I explain the matted row method of planting strawberries, particularly the renovation period? Did you maybe want to talk about that a little more, Darren?
Sorry, I don't have a mic or camera at my station there, but the matted row is going to take me too long to talk about by typing. So matted row system is acceptable production for maximizing yield in June crop varieties only. It doesn't work with day neutral everbearing varieties. And it's very simply doing a lot of what we're talking about in the June crop management. Controlling your development of your daughter plants into confined raised rows with a fairly dense spacing, thinning them down to like 8 to 12 inches on the daughter plants, removing all the old crowns every year or so, and maintaining this really dense planting of daughter plants that are continually producing those strawberries. So it's a high efficiency way of producing June crop varieties specifically, and doesn't work for day neutral and everbearing types.
Thank you, Dan. Darren, everybody. He knows everything. Does that help answer that, or would you like us to talk a little bit more about anything else? Really great questions, by the way, everybody. Thank you. All righty. Well, I think that makes, here we go. So mow down all the mother plants each year for June bearing in the matted row. Yes, after production in late July. Oh, well, thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate you showing up today and listening to me. I really, really do appreciate it. I hope to see you all around the garden center soon and that we can start some new conversations moving forward. Oh, one last question from Lauren here. Cover the daughters with straw for overwintering. Last question, sorry. So again, you don't want to cover the crowns with anything. You want the crowns to be left available. you know, at that level, that just right planting, you're going to want to mulch around them. You're not going to want the straw to be directly on top of the crown because you might promote some disease or fungal issues. If that helps. Yes, it does. Thank you. All right, everybody, I think we're going to call that a day. Whoop. Darren says June crop varieties in colder climates than ours can be mulched. Oh, there we go. But in ours, we're so moist here. Okay, again, final sign off, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today. And I'm looking forward to having conversations in the future. Have a great rest of your day.